family and friends, brothers and sisters. Today is July 30th, 2016. We are here live on Kodish, speaking with our President Asaru, President of the United Nubian Nation of Moors. Good evening. We are here discussing solutions to an old age question since the Emancipation Proclamation. It is a question on most of our minds today. What shall be done about the Moors, so-called African American problem here in the United States of America and around the world? Rahul back, President Asaru.
Rahul back.
Okay, it cannot be denied that this question is one grand cause of the tremendous war now upon us and likely to continue upon us until the Moors are united and solve this problem. What we know is that the Indo-European has said something like a plausible argument in favor of leaving things to their own course. No such policy avails now. The question now stands before us as one of life and death. So with that being said, let us now get to the meat of this matter. First question, President Asaru. Historically, black people have always struggled with racism because it proves capable of changing and adapting and hiding in plain sight. Why is North America still a racist country, even with an African man being its president for the past 8 years?
Well, I would like to say, firstly, I don't think North America is racist. I think the United States government is racist because it was founded on racism. And this is not a hate statement. This is more of a factual statement. It was founded off the backs of people who they put in massive servitude because they kidnapped them. And so because it was founded off of this premise, this is the reason why today we still see it. It's still evident in everyday lifestyle. Now, instead of lynchings and hangings, now they have mass killings with the police.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
police brutality.
You know, and this is something that was happening, you know, never was not happening, which is the fact now everybody has a camera phone. So now the whole world gets to see every time the police is somewhere, there's somebody else, a pedestrian, you know, a civilian, who's recording to see, you know, if the police is going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in most cases, when they are being recorded, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. We just recently saw a video of a police officer actually killing another police officer who was undercover because he didn't go to the briefing, didn't know the guy was undercover. Mm-hmm. So when he was left to his own devices, mm-hmm. he just killed him. So if that would have been a regular civilian, he would have been killed dead anyway. You know, just so happened he killed one of his own. You know, and so that's why this country, when I say this country, I mean the United States of America, is still racist, because it was founded on racism, and it was founded on the premise that white men are endowed by their creators to have certain abilities and be able to do certain things, and that what they're calling to be African American today, nigger then, Negro at some other time and space, mm-hmm. He wasn't and she wasn't considered to be a human being. So they didn't feel like they was doing anything wrong. You know, just so happens they was obviously in error.
True. Very true. Okay, so next question. Let's go back to Abraham Lincoln, since he was the father of the Emancipation Proclamation for the Negroes at that time. Lincoln was running for president, and his presidency centered on what to do about the Moor, so-called Negro in America. Lincoln asserted that there is a physical difference between whites and blacks that he believes will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And given that fact, he was in favor of assigning the superior position to the white race. So the question is, what are your thoughts on this quote as related to today's issue in our nation?
Well, Lincoln was speaking from a place of his government. His government meaning he was a part of the United States government, and because, again, it was built off of the backs of people who they kidnapped, which, by the way, is a federal crime. He had to feel that he had to assert the superior position to those who were building a nation. You know, so he was right that as he don't see us being on the same level, so to speak, as far as socially and politically, because the lion and the leopard are not on the same level.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? While they may both be felines in the feline category,
right?
They have different ways that they live. One is a social creature, the other one is a solitary creature, and they have their own way that they do things. And whenever they come in contact with each other, is usually a problem if they don't avoid each other because of jurisdictional boundaries. So it's the same thing with us and them. It's not that we're not in the human species, but as two different types of humans, we operate differently. We like different types of music, different types of food. We socialize differently. So that whole energy that we bring is not the same energy that they bring. And it don't make them less. It don't make them evil. It just make them them. And we understand them. And so after seeing how they operate and what they do when they're in control and in charge and ruling, who wants to be a part of that? So, you know, two species that are in the same category, but of a different stock, so to speak, don't act alike. You know, you got different birds. That might be in the fowl species, but different type of fowl. You know, the hawk and the eagle don't hang out together, but they both birds. And this is this is not a bad statement for them not to want to hang out.
Right.
You know, so like I said, if the lion and the leopard don't hang out together, you know, we don't call that, you know, felinism. You know, to make it a bad thing. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's just a reality that when you got two species that come in contact with each other that's not from the same source, they act differently. This is why a Nubian or a black man, as he's called, or Moor, as he's called, depends on where you at, what's your mental space, depends on where they are. Not where they are, but depends on, the different species. If a Moor or a black person come in contact with each other, they generally don't have a problem intermingling immediately, even if they not from the same place. You know, even in their different ideology, they recognize that the other person is them.
Exactly.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the only really barriers is the barriers that we put up. Like, I'm Crip and you Blood. So you would be family, but you wearing blue.
Wow.
And from the other side, you would be family, but you wearing red. Now they ain't had no colors, then it would be all good. So unless we put up a barrier, there is no barrier. But with the Indo-European, he has a barrier. He recognizes that you're not him. The same way that the army ant recognizes that the fire ant is not him. And because they occupy the same space at the same time, it usually is a problem. So if we could eliminate the being in their space, meaning being in their schools, being in their banks, being in their church, being in their government, especially in their government, we have our own. You know, let's bring the best of what we have home, you know, so we can build our nation, you know, off of a foundation where it's built on love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
I totally agree. Never heard it put that way before, but it makes a lot of sense. So let's move on. Third question. Over the past 150 years or so, our solutions have come in the form of black nationalism and black power, and now today, Black Lives Matter. Let's for a minute discuss some of our great leaders and teachers to get a better understanding of our triumphs and failures to unite as a nation of people and solve the Indo-European problem with the Moorish people. In the early 1900s, there were two mighty men that stood out in the movement: Marcus Garvey Jr., founder of the UNIA, and Noble Drew Ali, who was founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Marcus Garvey stood for liberation, and complete independence of African Americans. Garvey believed that each race and each nationality should endeavor to work out its own destiny. His solution was the investment of ships that would take the African people back to Africa, as he believed they came through and by the slave trade. Noble Drew Ali movement was entrenched in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. His mission was to provide the Moorish Americans with a sense of identity in the world and promote civic involvement. We know these two leaders knew each other because Marcus Garvey is mentioned in the teachings of Noble Drew Ali. Now, can you expound on these two leaders and give us a better understanding of their roles in the early 1900s to unite the so-called African American?
Sure. Both of these people, being our people, both were fighting the same fight, just in different ways. Noble Drew Ali was teaching us how to have a sense of pride and nationality and being involved in politics, through civics. Marcus Garvey was teaching the same thing as you just read. He was talking about a nation having the ability to work out its own issues and be independent. They both were having the same type of discussion, just shaping it differently. Both of them mean something to us. They're both our brothers, elders, ancestors now. They've been passed on. And they both were encountering a problem at that day and time, just happened to be in the early 1900s. And based on, the day and time they were in, they were bringing certain things to us to try to help us.
Right.
And it was successful to a degree, but it ends up not being successful completely in the end. Meaning, Noble Drew Ali teaching's been around for 88 years. And the results of it today, the best results of it today, is brothers who are highly educated in history, and teaching about some of our contributions to society, European society, etc., which is good. That's a step, but that's the best that we have to offer from them. Then you got Marcus Garvey, whose movement totally fell to the wayside in America because nobody was trying to massively leave the USA to go back to Africa, any country in Africa. While there were some people that left on their own accord, there wasn't a massive movement to get out, which was all about what Marcus Garvey was talking about, going back to Africa.
Right.
Because he was limited on information to no discredit of Marcus Garvey, but he felt that everybody that was black in America was kidnapped from Africa. And that's just not true, because we know that we are the indigenous peoples here. Most of us, some of us was kidnapped and brought here, but the vast majority of us trace our roots back to some Native American tribe, letting us know that we are indigenous to this very land here. We were on the Trail of Tears. We were on the land when they got off the boat to greet the indigenous peoples here. And we know that based on not only Google search of the Olmec, O-L-M-E-C, the oldest found peoples here in America who are what they would call of the Negroid stock. And Ivan Van Sertima also wrote about it in one of his books called They Came Before Columbus, teaching about the fact that what was being called the Negro is indigenous to this very land right here. And some of our people were kidnapped from Mother Africa and brought over here. So he was limited in some information, but he was advanced in some other information. So, but again, that fell to the wayside, and that died off. And the results today, 2016, there's nobody moving in that vein.
Right. Okay. Fourth question. Okay, fast forward to the mid-1900s. Elijah Muhammad, founder of the Nation of Islam, came up after Garveyism and the Moorish Science Temple movement. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad mission was to resurrect the black man and woman. He published a book called The Message to the Black Man. In that book, he talked about his ideology and how the black man can improve himself in America. The book called for justice under the laws of America, or help settle black people in a separate land of its own, here or elsewhere. Now, what are the realities today for the more so-called African American to either be relocated to another land here or anywhere else in America? What really are the realities of that?
It's not going to happen, and it hasn't happened. You know, again, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was another one of our elders who came with a solution.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little more viable in his solution because he didn't just have a doctrine only. He was actually building communities within the United States government. You know, getting our people off drugs. You know, you talk about fighting the war on terror. Getting our people off drugs, off alcohol, cleaning them up, giving them a sense of pride. You know, of course, Islam was the religion of choice because it seems to be in opposition of Christianity, which is totally not true. They stem from the same source. You know, Abraham being the forerunner for both sides.
Right.
So, and when I say both sides, I mean the lineage of you know, Prophet Muhammad and the lineage of Yeshua, known as Jesus. So that reality of being settled in a separate land, you know, which is a question that was asked towards the United States government, you know, to help relocate.
Right.
The helping part he was talking about was the United States helping us relocate somewhere else. But where are we going to go? Anywhere we go is going to be our land. The point is, you know, where are we going to go? You get what I'm saying? You know, so that didn't happen. But what he did was he was able to build up communities across the United States to help bring about some change. And it did help. You know, it did help a lot of people. It is a movement that's still in existence today. But just like all the other movements, it can only go so far. It's stagnated. Right. You know, and the stagnation we'll touch up on later towards, I guess, towards the end of this. Right. I guess we can bring it all full circle. Okay. Why or what was the main problem that was in front of all of these great leaders who came? Okay. Okay, so now Dr. John Henry Clark, he was a Pan-Africanist, writer, historian, professor, and a pioneer in the creation of Africana studies. John Henry Clark, and one of my favorite documentaries that he published was called A Great and Mighty Walk. In this mighty walk, he talks about his upbringing and his growing interest in Pan-Africanism, the failures of the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power Movement, his close friendship with Malcolm X, and his critical assessment of Louis Farrakhan's Million Man March. He also described how Black Africans were methodically removed from the history of the civilization of the now. He details how leaders like Marcus Garvey, W.E. Du Bois spread the ideals of Pan-Africanism throughout the United States and the world. Dr. Clark made a profound statement, and I'm going to quote that statement. And I want you to, again, expound on, I'll come to that question. Okay, but Dr. Clark made a profound statement, and I quote, "To hold a people in oppression, you have to convince them first that they are supposed to be oppressed." Now, Dr. Clark also stated that racism is an invention because nature created no race. What are your thoughts on that? My thoughts would be, you know, I don't fully have an understanding on how he meant nature creates no race. Because we see in nature, be it, the what they call it the black race or the Negroid race and the white race. They're two different species, but yet of the same family. Different blood types, different diseases that different melanin, etc. So, or lack thereof. So I can't really say how he meant it when he said it. He's a very brilliant man, an elder who definitely was about the liberation of his people like everybody else. But yet, again, even with all of that he brought to the table, all that information and all that knowledge, very few of our people have even gravitated to what he was bringing, on a scientific level.
Right.
Because we're not just talking about a guy who was just speaking out of air. It's talking about a guy who was in the field doing research, taking people on trips to see the research. First-hand accounts. I mean, Dr. Clark, really, he was one of the great minds of our time. After the freeing of the so-called Negro in slavery.
Right.
We've always had brilliant people within our racial family, but they didn't necessarily have their contributions counted because another group of people was always stepping on their back, taking their patents, taking their ideas, claiming it as their own, because this government was built for them. So they took the best of what our people had to offer and they advanced their society, but had no thought of how it would affect our children because they didn't care. Y'all want to eat, y'all go in the back. Y'all go in the back. Y'all want something to drink, you go drink on that fountain. And then after all the separation and now you're free, okay, now let's go lynch them. So it was always a problem dealing with this group of people. Not all of them, but the mass majority of them. You can't judge them on an individual level. You got to judge them as a species. That's the problem. You'll be like, well, not all white people are bad. Well, that's true. Not all white people are bad. But as a species, they're very dangerous. Because you see what they do as a species. When they was attacking us, they wasn't doing it on an individual level. They were doing it on a collective level. Thousands, if not millions of them. And they all had a unanimous agreement that no matter where we were, it was a problem with us. Yeah, they had their problems. Their internal problems, fighting and killing each other, but whenever it came to us, they was able to unite. You get what I'm saying? That's exactly what happened in 1715 when we as Yamasee Native Americans rose up against the British, and kicked some butt, and then they had to go and get all their brothers. Everybody came together to push us out, and then of course, according to the United States government, they say the Yamasee tribe, who they call an African group of Native Americans, who they say were the fiercest of all the tribes in the South, they say disappeared from the historical record, which that's not true because we're here, and I am one. So, hope that answers that question.
Yes, it did. Okay. So, moving on, we're going to move on to the 1960s. We have Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, famous, speech, the I Have a Dream speech. And we have Malcolm X, the By Any Means Necessary.
Right.
In 1967, after Martin Luther King did his famous I Have a Dream speech, he revisited that speech in a video called My Dream Has Turned into a Nightmare. In that video, he states, and I'm going to quote two things that he stated in that video that stood out to me. His first quote stated that, in many points, my dream has turned into a nightmare, but I am not losing hope. I had to analyze many things, and now I see that there are many more difficult days ahead. And the old optimism was superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realization. What do you think was the realization that King spoke of?
that we can't live in the same government. We can't be together. He was optimistic about us uniting through integration, but as he said, he had to revisit some things, he had to reanalyze some things, and the old optimism had to be tempered, with realistic, tangible evidence. Because Martin Luther King was another person who was in the field.
Right.
He wasn't the guy that had a Million Man March and flew in. He was the guy that had a Million Man March and walked in. Wore out several pairs of shoes.
Stacey Adams.
So this is a guy that led from the front, and he was in the field. And as he was in the field with both his kind and non his kind, on a poor people's agenda, because that's what it was called, March on Washington for Poor People. He realized that his dream was turning into a nightmare. As he said, what you didn't mention, what you probably would, that he feared that he was bringing his people into a burning building.
Right.
That
was the next quote that.
So he realized that the more he fought for equality, which was getting us closer to him, because it was going to mean to be integrated, the more he saw more problems. And as he said, there were going to be more difficult days ahead, which he wasn't able to see.
Right.
Because one of the most peaceful men to ever protest was killed violently at the hands of the white race in Memphis, Tennessee, on the balcony. Most peaceful man to ever protest shot in the face. I don't even know if he had an open casket. I do vaguely remember seeing images of him, but I can't recall if they showed his whole face or not. But the point being, because that's neither here nor there. The point being that he was very peaceful. He was very involved in what he was doing. He accepted for value what he was doing, and as he was doing it, things were being tweaked, because that's what happens when you're in the field dealing with actual evidence. When new things resurface, you have to reevaluate these things and see what's the best course based on what's happening right now. You might have had an idea what you wanted to do, but based on what you're doing at that moment, might have to be deviated and changed, and things might have to be recalibrated. Things have to be amended, so to speak. So he was very brilliant in what he was doing. He showed the world that even if you're peaceful, the white race is not. Because no matter how peaceful he was, the United States government was the one attacking the people. It wasn't civilians burning KKK crosses. I'm not saying it wasn't, but the massive amount of blockade that they was receiving was from the United States government via the police department, the fire department, the FBI, CIA. All levels of government was fighting, against Martin Luther King and Honorable Elijah Muhammad at the same time.
That's right.
And end up getting rid of all of their prominentness at that time. They killed Malcolm X. They killed Martin Luther King. When I say they, even if they didn't pull the trigger, their hand was involved.
Right. And they admitted to killing Martin Luther King. The government of America, United States, admitted to killing King, and also
and they gave an apology.
Always
an apology.
Right.
But with nothing behind the apology, the words are empty. I apologize for killing one of the greatest minds y'all had, but that's as far as it's gonna go. I'm sorry we did that.
Yeah.
Let's move along. But no compensation, no land, no what they would call reparation, nothing. Just a Martin Luther King Boulevard, which is usually in the worst areas of the segments of society.
That is true. Okay, so you did mention part of my next statement made by Martin Luther King was also a very important statement. It wasn't an admission of wrong. It was an admission of understanding that we need to do something different. So on that quote, I'm going to quote it anyway, and you can expound more, or we can go on to the next question. But in this statement, and I quote, "We struggle hard and long to gain our victories we have attained. Yet there is something that troubles me deeply. For all the civil rights and all other things we've done, I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house and we have no choice but to become firemen. So with that statement, when he said we have no other choice than to become firemen, are he saying, "Oh, we're gonna put the"? I mean, what was the fire that that he spoke about?
The fire was them. Dealing with them, and we were gonna have to be very strategic on how we was gonna deal with them. AKA firemen.
Oh, okay.
It didn't mean literal fire. It was a metaphoric fire, a symbolic fire. And that building he was talking about was the United States government, because that's where he was pushing policy. So he got a lot of stuff done for us, gave us a platform to fight for our rights, even if it was through civil rights, for us to be able to get to a certain point where we realize we don't even need the civil rights. Because you can't civilize us as the civilizers.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So, and this was kind of like a trap. Put black people in the confines of civil rights, and then you can still exclude human rights. So whenever something happens to a black man, a Nubian, a Moor, whatever you want to call them, it's a civil rights violation, but never a human rights violation. And it's a big difference between a civil rights violation, which falls up under the code system, and a human rights violation, which falls up under your rights that have been endowed to you by the Creator. Now, mind you, this is a government that thinks that black people, as they call them, are 3/5 of a human being, subhuman. So, of course, by him stating that our people are supposed to be subhuman, which we know is a lie, being that we are the mothers and fathers of all civilization. You can't go anywhere where we didn't contribute, from the top down, or the ground up. It's just, a lot of their stuff they deal with is just devilment. So the best choice is to just come out.
Right.
Not even deal with their government, not deal with their policy. Some people might not understand what we mean when we say not deal. We don't mean do nothing. We mean come out of that government. Be a part of your own government. Bring the best of what you have to offer over, and let's work to build a better place for you, I, and our children. That's what we say.
Totally agree. Okay, we can go on because I think. Well, I have one more question about Martin Luther King.
Go ahead.
Okay, do you think Martin Luther King finally understood the reality of trying to live peacefully with the Indo-European in America? That all it was just a dream.
Yeah, it was a dream.
Dream that
turned into his nightmare.
Well, yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah.